Have you ever felt like you're living a life that isn't truly yours? Have you ever smiled when you wanted to cry? Said yes when every part of your soul screamed no? Have you ever gone out of your way to please everyone, only to return home feeling strangely empty, even invisible? If so, this video is for you. Because today, we're not just talking about people-pleasing. We're talking about the quiet erosion of your soul that happens every time you betray yourself for the sake of harmony. We're diving into a hidden war, one that rages within many of us. A war between who we truly are and the role we feel we must play to be loved, accepted, or simply tolerated. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists of the 20th century, called this socially acceptable role the persona, a mask we wear to face the world. But what happens when you forget you're wearing a mask and begin to think it's your true face? What if I told you that this mask, once designed to protect you, is now quietly destroying you? In the next hour, you won't just hear theories, you'll see your own reflection. You'll be challenged to confront the silent compromises you've made, and perhaps like many before you, you'll begin a journey not away from others, but back to yourself. So take a breath. You might feel a little uncomfortable. That's okay. Growth never comes without discomfort, and healing always begins with truth. Let's begin. Have you ever wondered why you keep smiling even when you feel like falling apart inside? Why you say it's okay when everything is clearly not? Why, after a day full of praise, people thanking you for being kind, helpful, understanding, you still go home feeling exhausted, even invisible? There are wounds that don't bleed. No screaming, no visible scars. These are the wounds that grow silently inside the soul when you stop living from your truth and begin existing for the comfort of others. Each day you give in a little more. You swallow your anger, say yes instead of no, agree when you disagree just to keep the peace. To others, you're a dream, agreeable, calm, sweet, always available. They call you kind, reliable, thoughtful, but the price of their comfort is you. You trade your time, your energy, your sleep, your freedom, and sometimes your core values just to be liked, to be accepted, to not cause trouble. You were once a child who could say, "I don't like that." A child who had boundaries, preferences, emotions. But over the years, you were taught that to be loved, you had to be nice, you had to be easy, you had to make others feel good, even if it came at your expense. You learned that. Being accepted means being agreeable. Avoiding conflict is always better. Other people's comfort is more important than your truth. Slowly, you stop living as yourself and begin performing a role. Carl Jung called this role the persona, a social mask we wear to survive in society. The mask itself isn't bad. It's necessary, but when you forget it's just a mask and begin believing it's your true face, that's when the tragedy begins. Think of this. You say yes to a project even though you're already burning out. You stay to listen to someone else's problems even though you haven't been heard in weeks. You take responsibility for others' tasks because they're going through something while silently carrying your own breakdown. Every one of these actions, though seemingly kind, becomes a small betrayal of yourself. Bit by bit, you lose connection to your own emotions. You don't know what you want anymore. Your decisions become reflexive, not intuitive. You live on autopilot. And the dangerous part is no one notices. You still smile, you still function, you still post cheerful pictures online. But when you're alone and the mask falls, the face underneath starts to fade. Not because you're weak, but because you've been living too long without truly being present in your own life. Why do we fall into this trap? Because it's not just about wanting to be liked. It's about something primal. The fear of rejection, the terror of abandonment, the fear of not belonging. Evolutionarily, to be excluded meant death. Your nervous system remembers, so being accepted becomes survival. But the cruel irony is this: the acceptance you buy by betraying yourself is never enough. It's temporary, conditional, fleeting. The more you give, the more is expected. You become the one who always helps, the one who never complains. You are no longer a person, you're a role. And then one day you wake up, hollow. You still laugh, but your eyes don't shine. You still show up, but your heart stays behind. You're still loved, but you no longer love yourself. And that is the beginning of awakening. Awakening is rarely glorious. It often starts in a quiet moment, a sleepless night, a tear-stained pillow, a trembling. No, that feels like a sin. But in that moment, something ancient within you begins to stir. The part of you that remembers who you were before the mask. As Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Maybe you're just beginning, or maybe you're in the middle of the storm, or maybe you've just walked through the fire. Wherever you are, know this, you are not alone. In the next chapter, we'll dive deeper into the nature of the persona, when it protects us and when it traps us, how to recognize it, and most importantly, how to step out from behind it. Not all suffering can be seen. Some pain does not scream, does not bleed, and does not ask for help. It lingers in silence, wears a smile, and goes to work on time. It keeps the house clean, replies to messages, and even remembers birthdays. This is the pain of self-abandonment. It is a quiet ache, hard to name and harder to explain, a weight you carry in your chest, though the world sees nothing, a tension in your shoulders, a lump in your throat, a tiredness sleep cannot fix. What is the persona? Why do we build it? When does it serve us, and when does it start to strangle us? Because to heal, we must first understand what we're healing from. There comes a moment often unnoticed when you stop expressing yourself and start performing. You laugh not because it's funny, but because it's expected. You agree not because you truly do, but because disagreement feels dangerous. You nod, smile, adapt, until one day you forget who you were before all the nodding began. This is the work of the persona. Carl Jung described the persona as a social mask, a character we create to navigate society. It's not inherently bad. In fact, it's necessary. The persona allows us to function in the world, to play roles, to maintain order. But problems arise when we mistake the mask for the face beneath. You are not your job title. You are not your polite smile. You are not the role you play at family dinners or company meetings. And yet, how often do we confuse ourselves with these masks? Think about it. You act calm even when you're screaming inside. You offer help even when you're depleted. You pretend to be fine because people depend on you. At first it works. You get praised, promoted, included. The persona becomes a success story. People admire the version of you that never complains, never argues, never says no. But inside, you start to vanish. The persona was meant to be a bridge, but for many, it becomes a cage. The more polished your mask, the harder it is to breathe behind it. The more praise you get for being easy, the more afraid you become of being honest. Because what if they only love the role? What if they only respect the performance? This is the paradox of the persona. It gains you access to the world, but at the cost of authenticity. And slowly, a fracture appears, a subtle dissonance between who you are and who you pretend to be. You feel it when you're alone, the exhaustion that sleep won't fix, the numbness that joy can't reach, the strange sense that you're living someone else's life. Jung warned that when we identify too strongly with the persona, We lose touch with the self. And when that happens, we don't just feel tired, we feel lost. The persona becomes skin and the real you. Buried beneath expectations, roles, and rehearsed smiles. But here's the truth. The persona is not the enemy. It's a tool, a necessary adaptation. You need it to survive in society, but you were never meant to become it. There is a real person behind the performance, a self with edges, contradictions, needs, and fire. That person might not always be nice, but they are real. And wholeness, true. Healing only begins when you stop polishing the mask and start listening to the face beneath it. In the next chapter, we'll explore what happens when the mask begins to crack, when your soul starts sending signals that it can no longer play the role, and how to recognize the beginning of the break. That just might lead to your breakthrough. At first, the mask feels like armor. It protects you. It allows you to move through the world without showing too much feeling, too deeply, or risking too often. It keeps you safe. But somewhere along the way, it fuses with your skin. What once was a choice becomes a compulsion. You don't even notice you're wearing it anymore. The smile, the nod, the agreeable tone, it all becomes automatic, reflex habit. And here's the danger when the mask becomes your skin. Taking it off feels like self-destruction. You begin to fear authenticity. Vulnerability feels foreign. Honesty becomes terrifying. You no longer know how to say no without guilt, how to ask for help without shame, how to cry without apology. You've forgotten how to be real and the world. It keeps rewarding your performance. You're so strong. You're always so composed. We can always count on you. They mean it as praise. But to your soul, it feels like pressure. Suffocating, inescapable. You've become the person others need, at the cost of the person you are. This is how you slowly disappear, not in one dramatic moment, but in tiny acts of self-denial repeated over years. The silence you kept, the resentment you buried, the dreams you postponed, the opinions you swallowed. Each one a thread unraveling the fabric of your authenticity. Eventually, you no longer know what you want. You ask others, "What do you think I should do?" You look for permission to feel validation to exist, because your inner compass has gone quiet, and yet something deep inside refuses to die. That part of you, the raw, wild, unpolished self, begins to stir, not with words, but with discomfort, with anxiety, with restlessness, with a sense that you're meant for something more than this rehearsed existence. The mask is cracking. You feel it in your bones, in your chest. In the dreams that haunt you, in the tears you can't explain, in the ache of being seen, only as what you've always pretended to be. But here's the truth. You were never meant to be perfect. You were meant to be whole. And wholeness requires imperfection, requires contradiction, requires truth. It is not weakness to take off the mask. It is strength. It is rebellion. It is the beginning of freedom. In the next chapter, we'll explore the inner war that erupts when your true self begins to resist the mask. The ego wants stability. The unconscious demands truth. And in that collision, something sacred begins to emerge. There's a war happening inside you, but no one can see it. On the surface, everything looks normal. You go to work, you smile at strangers, you say, "I'm fine" when someone asks how you are. But beneath that calm exterior, something is stirring, a quiet rebellion, a conflict you can't quite name. It's the war between your ego and your unconscious. The ego is the part of you that wants control, order, stability. It cares about appearances, It wants to be liked, accepted, respected. The ego is the one who wears the mask and polishes it daily. The unconscious is something else entirely. It is wild, symbolic, ancient. It doesn't speak in language. It speaks in emotion, dreams, impulses, and sensations, and it does not negotiate. It demands truth. While your ego tries to maintain the performance, the unconscious begins to resist. At first it whispers, a strange discomfort in your chest, a growing disinterest in things that used to excite you, a nagging question. Is this all there is? Then it starts to shout. Anxiety with no obvious trigger, sudden irritability, emotional overreactions, physical symptoms with no medical explanation, exhaustion that sleep can't cure. These are not random, they are messages, signals that your soul is out of alignment. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious has a compensatory function. When the ego pulls too far in one direction toward control, perfection pleasing the unconscious pulls back, trying to restore balance. If you keep pretending, the unconscious will stop asking. It will start forcing. You'll find yourself breaking down in public, lashing out at loved ones, making self-sabotaging decisions you don't understand, because the part of you that you've been ignoring is tired of being ignored. And the most painful part, this rebellion often looks like failure. You miss deadlines, you withdraw from friends, you cry for no reason, you feel like you're falling apart, but you're not falling apart. You're falling out of illusion. This is the breakdown before the breakthrough. The unconscious doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to save you from a life of numbness, from a self you never chose, from a story that was written for you. Not by you, but to listen. You must be willing to stop pretending. You must be willing to feel what you've avoided, to face what you've denied, to admit that the life you've built, however impressive, might not be aligned with who you truly are. This is the beginning of awakening. In the next chapter, we'll look more closely at how this inner war manifests in your daily life, the patterns, the reactions, the exhaustion, and why the path to healing always begins with one terrifying, liberating act: telling the truth. Not all personalities carry the same burden when it comes to pleasing others. Some people can say no with ease. They set boundaries without guilt. They prioritize their own needs and still feel worthy. But for others, the idea of disappointing someone feels unbearable. Their sense of identity is wrapped around being liked, being useful, being needed. They shapeshift to fit the expectations of the room. They're the peacekeepers, the helpers, the givers. Carl Jung identified this as the extraverted feeling type. For these individuals, harmony is not just a preference, it's a lifeline. They are wired to sense the emotions of others, often before those emotions are even expressed. They walk into a room and instinctively adjust their tone, their words, their presence. Anything to keep the atmosphere calm. Anything to be accepted. And on the surface, this looks like compassion. It looks like empathy, diplomacy, kindness. And in many ways it is. But taken to the extreme, this way of being becomes a form of self-erasure. Their moral compass points outward, not inward. They don't ask, what do I want? They ask, what do they expect from me? And this subtle inversion, living from the outside in, creates a dangerous fragility. They stay in relationships that hurt. They say yes when they mean no. They advocate for things they don't believe in, all to maintain the image of being good, agreeable, acceptable. And when they fail to please, they don't just feel rejection, they feel collapse. as if their entire sense of self is crumbling. Because when your identity depends on others' approval, disapproval feels like annihilation. Worse still, many of them don't even realize it's happening because they're operating on autopilot. Because being helpful, agreeable, selfless, that's just who they are. Or so they've been told. Since childhood, reinforced by praise, rewarded with love. But this isn't love, it's conditional validation. And it comes with a price, because deep down, the extroverted feeler often confuses being loved with being useful. They believe their value lies in service, in sacrifice, in saying yes, and when they finally stop, when they dare to say no, they are overwhelmed with guilt. Not just guilt, but fear. Fear of being abandoned, disliked, unworthy. This is not weakness. It's a learned survival strategy. It's the result of growing up in environments where love was earned, not given. Where being good meant being obedient. Where emotions had to be managed, so adults wouldn't be uncomfortable. And while this type may be more vulnerable to people-pleasing, the pattern exists in all of us. Every time you swallow your truth to avoid tension, you live from the same logic. Every time you downplay your needs so others won't be inconvenienced, you disappear a little. And every time you smile, when you want to scream, nod, when you want to walk away, say, sure. When your soul says no, you are reinforcing a lie that being accepted is more important than being authentic. But the unconscious keeps score, and eventually it rebels with symptoms, with dreams, with compulsions, with exhaustion. In the next chapter, we'll look closer at how the unconscious tries to break this pattern through messages, through symbols, through the body. Because even if you've forgotten who you are, your soul hasn't. The unconscious does not speak in sentences. It speaks in symbols. When you live out of alignment with your inner truth, your unconscious doesn't write you a letter or send you a polite message. It whispers, it pushes, it warns. And if you ignore it long enough, it screams. It starts small, strange dreams that linger long after you wake. An image you can't forget, a feeling that won't go away, a discomfort that defies logic. You dream of being chased, trapped, silenced. You dream of falling, of drowning, of showing up somewhere naked and exposed. These dreams aren't nonsense, they're not random. They are metaphors crafted by your psyche to reveal what your conscious mind refuses to see. Jung called dreams the royal road to the unconscious, not because they predict the future, but because they reflect the present, the hidden present, the emotional reality buried under performance and routine. In these dreams, being chased may symbolize the parts of you that are demanding attention. Being trapped may reflect your life situation, feeling stuck, voiceless, unseen. Showing up naked may point to your fear of being truly seen without your mask. But the unconscious doesn't stop with dreams. It speaks through your body too. You begin to experience symptoms that defy diagnosis. A tight chest, a lump in your throat, chronic exhaustion, digestive issues, insomnia, panic attacks. The doctor runs tests. Everything looks fine, but you know something is off. That something is your soul signaling distress. Not metaphorically, literally. The psyche and the body are not separate. When the unconscious isn't heard, it turns to the nervous system, to the muscles, to the breath. You try to distract yourself. More work, more scrolling, more noise. But the silence always returns. And in that silence, the pain gets louder. You might find yourself compulsively busy, overeating, overspending, overcommitting. You fill every gap in the day because you fear what the stillness will reveal. But here's the truth. Your distractions are symptoms too. They are defense mechanisms, attempts to avoid the message that something in your life no longer fits. The unconscious is not your enemy. It is your compass. It doesn't want you to suffer. It wants you to return, to remember, to reconnect with the parts of yourself that have been neglected, suppressed, or abandoned. And here's what makes it even more powerful. It won't give up on you. No matter how long you've ignored it, no matter how far you've strayed, your unconscious keeps sending signals. It keeps knocking on the door. It's in the dream you had last night, the tightness in your stomach this morning, the way your body tensed when you agreed to something you didn't want to do. The question is, will you listen? In the next chapter, we'll explore what happens when the unconscious begins to break through, when your inner truth can no longer be silenced, and how that breakdown might be the beginning of a profound breakthrough. There comes a point when the unconscious no longer whispers, it erupts. This is the moment the shadow begins to rise. Carl Jung called the shadow the hidden part of the psyche. Everything you've disowned, denied, or repressed in order to fit in. Your anger, your envy, your sadness, your impulses, your unmet needs, your truth. These parts don't disappear. They go underground, and over time, they grow stronger. You try to be calm, kind, composed. But deep beneath the performance, there is rage, resentment, a wild, untamed voice screaming, "Enough!" At first, the rebellion is quiet. You feel irritated by things that never used to bother you. You withdraw from conversations. You cancel plans without knowing why. You look in the mirror and feel like a stranger. Then the rebellion grows. You snap at someone you love. You cry in the middle of the day. You sabotage your own success. You stop pretending, not because you've lost control, but because you've lost the will to keep lying. The shadow is not evil. It is not dangerous. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is the part of you that remembers. It remembers the dreams you buried, the boundaries you never set, the truth you never spoke. It remembers the you that existed before the world told you who to be. And when the mask becomes too tight, when the role becomes unbearable, the shadow fights to reclaim you. This is not destruction. It is resurrection. But it doesn't feel that way. To the ego, it feels like failure, like chaos, like you're coming undone. But to the soul, it feels like coming home. The rise of the shadow is the psyche's way of demanding truth. It says, no more pretending, no more silence, no more betraying yourself in the name of peace. This is the storm before clarity. It may look like burnout. It may sound like crisis. But beneath the noise, something sacred is happening. Your true self is pushing through the cracks. You begin to feel what you've avoided, say what you've swallowed, want what you've denied. And yes, it's messy. Healing is not a clean, linear process. It's a spiral, a reckoning, a dismantling. But every time you face your shadow, you reclaim a part of yourself. Every time you stop hiding, you come closer to wholeness. The world teaches you to fear your shadow, to run from discomfort, to numb the pain. But Jung taught us something different, that what we most need will be found where we least want to look. The shadow is not your enemy, it is your teacher. In the next chapter, we'll explore how to meet the shadow with compassion, how to listen without judgment, and how this confrontation, painful as it may be, opens the door to integration, authenticity, and freedom. After the storm, something changes. You're not the same. You face the chaos, the breakdown, the disillusionment. You've looked into the mirror and seen not just the image you present, but the truths you've hidden. And now something ancient begins to awaken within you, the desire to become whole. Carl Jung called this process individuation. It is not self-improvement. It is not becoming someone new. It is the unfolding of who you already are beneath the roles, the masks, the conditioning. Individuation is the journey of integration. It's not about fixing yourself. It's about reclaiming yourself, all of you, the parts you love and the parts you loathe, the light and the shadow, the peace and the rage, the truth and the contradiction. It begins with awareness, with noticing the stories you've inherited, the roles you were assigned, the voice in your head that says, "You're only worthy if," and then bit by bit you begin to let go. You stop apologizing for your needs, you start setting boundaries, you speak truths you used to hide, you disappoint others and survive. Because you're no longer living for their script. You're writing your own. This path is not easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest you'll ever walk, because it asks you to break away from the familiar, to confront discomfort, to face loss, not just of people or positions, but of the false self you once depended on. And yet, with every step, something beautiful unfolds. You begin to feel peace, not the peace of pleasing others, but the peace of inner alignment. You begin to feel joy, not because you've performed well, but because you've connected deeply. You begin to trust your own voice, your own instincts, your own truth. And this is the miracle of individuation. You no longer need permission to exist. You no longer need applause to feel worthy. You belong to yourself. The world may not understand this new you. You may lose relationships built on the old version. You may walk away from environments that once defined you. You may find yourself alone for a time, but you are not empty. You are full with clarity, with truth, with presence. This is not perfection. This is wholeness. To individuate is to stop outsourcing your identity, to root yourself not in approval, but in authenticity. And that changes everything. In the next chapter, we'll explore what comes after this awakening, how to live without the mask, how to meet the world with your full, unfiltered self, and how to embrace a life where you are no longer performing, but simply powerfully being. So what happens after the mask falls away? What happens when you've faced your shadow, reclaimed your truth, and stepped onto the path of wholeness? You begin to live differently, not louder, not grander, but deeper, truer, more awake. Life without the mask isn't easier. It's more real. You start saying what you mean. You set boundaries and keep them. You disappoint people who once relied on your silence and discover that you're still standing. You no longer move through life asking, "How do I fit in?" Instead, you ask, "What feels right to me?" And this shift from performing to being transforms everything. You don't seek conflict, but you no longer fear it. You don't chase validation because your worth is no longer on trial. You don't pretend to enjoy what drains you. You don't shrink to fit someone else's comfort. You stop abandoning yourself for acceptance. And what you find surprisingly is that real connection begins here. Because when you show up without the mask, the people who resonate with your truth will find you. They won't love you for what you give them, but for who you are. Not for your usefulness, but for your presence. You may lose some people, you may leave some spaces, but what remains and what arrives is authentic, solid, soulful living. Without the mask is not about rejecting society. It's not about being rude or reckless. It's about choosing honesty over illusion, wholeness over approval, depth over performance. It's about remembering that your life is yours, your joy, your sorrow, your vision, your voice. You no longer seek to be liked, you seek to be free. And freedom isn't found in being everything for everyone. It's found in being yourself, fully, without apology. This kind of life has texture, it has color, it has risk, but it also has peace. The deep, grounded peace of alignment, where your thoughts, your words, your actions match. You meet the world from your center, not your mask. You speak with clarity, you move with integrity, you rest without guilt. You give from overflow, not depletion. This is not a finish line. It's a practice, a return, a remembering. Because the world will still try to hand you masks, scripts, expectations. But now you know you don't have to wear them. You don't have to play along. You can breathe. You can pause. You can choose. You are home now. In the final chapter, we'll talk about sustaining this transformation. How to walk this path, not just once, but daily. And how the courage to be yourself becomes the light that gives others permission to do the same. Transformation is not a single moment. It's a practice. It begins with awakening, but it deepens through repetition, through choices, through presence. After the mask falls, after the shadow speaks, after the self begins to emerge, what then? You live the truth, again and again. You won't always feel brave. You won't always feel certain. Some days, the old patterns will call to you. The need to please, the urge to perform, the temptation to disappear. That's okay, because transformation is not perfection, it's commitment. It's the commitment to return to yourself when you've drifted, to listen again when the noise takes over, to stand firm even when it shakes you. You learn to recognize the early signs, the tightness in your chest when you say yes too quickly, the fatigue that follows a conversation where you weren't honest, the subtle dread when you wake up to a day that doesn't feel like your own. These are your signals, your checkpoints, your invitations to return. And you will return to silence, to stillness, to self. You will rebuild trust with your own voice. You will forgive the moments you slipped. You will breathe, pause, and choose differently. This is how transformation becomes sustainable, not by eliminating struggle, but by responding to it with presence. You'll find new rhythms, new relationships, new rituals that support your truth. You might begin journaling not for productivity, but for connection. You might seek solitude not as escape, but as nourishment. You might surround yourself with people who see you, not your mask, not your performance, but you. And most of all, you'll begin to live from your center, that place inside you that knows, that remembers, that guides. It won't always be dramatic. Sometimes it will be quiet, like walking away from a conversation that no longer feels aligned, or saying no without guilt, or simply resting even when the world tells you to hustle. These small acts, they're sacred. They are the threads that weave your truth into your life. Not once, not for show, but every day. And over time, something beautiful happens. You become a presence, not just to yourself, but to others. Your courage gives others permission to be real. Your clarity helps others untangle. Your authenticity becomes an offering. This is the ripple effect of inner work. You heal yourself, and in doing so, you create space for others to heal too. Not by saving them, not by guiding them, but by showing them what's possible. A life without the mask. A life led from the inside out. So as you walk forward, know this. The path isn't always easy, but it is always worth it. Because there is nothing more powerful than a human being who has chosen to be fully themselves. No filter, no performance, no apology, just presence, just truth, just you.